So there are a lot of point and shoots out there. Some are good, some are bad. Some are super expensive, like the Pentax TX, which go for like thousands of dollars. And some of them, you can buy at an antique store for $10, like this Pentax IQZoom 120. So this is actually the only point and shoot camera that I do own. And like I mentioned, I picked this up at an antique store for $10. And this is in Oregon and about 2-3 years ago. So I've had some time to use it. Not that, I use it that much anyway. But I thought I'd kind of just, make a video talking about this camera because not really many people know about this camera. Because, when you look at, best point and shoots, it's always, the more well-known ones. And this camera is just like completely not even close to the level of those ones. So I, thought I'd just quickly kind of talk about it, my experiences using it, and kind of just, give some options out there for some, more affordable, not as good quality point and shoot cameras out there. It is pretty windy out here. So this camera is fully automotive, like most point and shoots are. The only real big difference between this one and others is this one does have a zoom lens, while other point and shoots do have that fixed focal range on it. This one does have a zoom lens of 38mm to 120, so you do have a nice focal range in there. You can get stuff close up, far away, so it is very handy. Even this sounds like in the middle of a bunch of windmills. This thing is still very robotic and annoying. Like, listen to this. This is not a very stealth camera at all. But this camera is, just made of all plastic. There's not really much to it. Probably very easy to break. All the buttons are, plastic as well. Not really much to it. So not really a high-end build quality to it, but it is still, a nice quality to it as well. You even have like a little grip here to hold on to, and just very easily, click the button as well. So a very nice kind of build design to it. Everything is nice and easy to kind of handle and everything like that, and everything just kind of works and flows very nicely. And there's even like a window to see kind of what film ISO and how many shots you're shooting as well, which is nice as well in case you forget. Like sometimes I've had rolls in these things for months, so it is kind of nice just to, look back and see that. But, pretty good build quality on this thing. So this camera does take CR2 batteries, and, I've never really used these batteries anywhere else before, so to me, they're not common in things that I use them for, but they are pretty common to find in stores. You have no problem finding them in like a Target or Amazon. So, that's very nice, and battery lasts about 5 to 10, rolls of film, so it has some good use out of them, but, obviously if you're going to use this a lot, definitely want to stock up on those batteries. I do not want to mess with this thing. So this camera does have a flash on it as well, which I don't know, could be interesting because, there are a lot of point and shoot cameras out there that, do have flashes. There are also a lot out there that don't have flashes. So it really just kind of depends on, what the manufacturers were thinking at the time. Like a lot of the higher end point and shoot cameras don't actually have flashes on them, but you can purchase an external flash for them, which a lot of people do end up doing anyway. So I just think that is something interesting to think about. But yeah, if you want to get kind of like those, kind of, the disposable camera effects with this thing, you're able to do that. So I think it's just nice to have a flash there, if you want to have one or if you don't. And you are able to get some dark stuff with this, which is kind of nice. So there are some buttons on the top of this camera to give you a little bit more control if you want it, but still for the most part it is just, point and shoot camera, so you're really only pointing and shooting. There's not really a whole lot of need for these buttons up top. But the first one is a flash. If you want to toggle that on, the flash to be on. If you want it to be off, or just, for night, or just a bulb mode, you do have those options there. And then the next button right next to it is just a red eye one. So if you're doing portraits, you can just turn that on or off depending on if you want red eye in your images or not. And then the one next to that one is just a self timer. So if you want to just, put this on a tripod or set it down somewhere and get a picture of you and your friends or your family. And then the last one is just kind of the focusing. So if you want to do like focus on like landscapes, kind of mountain stuff, or just like spot focusing, which would just be in the middle, or just, have it, focus wherever it wants it to. So those are the 4 buttons on top. I don't really, play around with them at all. I kind of just let the camera do its thing, kind of for the flash one as well. If, the camera thinks it's too dark, I'll, just let it shoot the flash. I don't really see a need to play around with them. There is also the option to kind of have the date appear on your image as well, which, is kind of cool sometimes when it does happen, but I've never actually figured out how to use this date thing. It's just, it seems pretty self-explanatory, like you got your month, your day, your year, kind of stuff like that, but whatever the way they set this up on this camera, I have no fucking clue what the order is or anything. It's just completely confusing to me. Never figured it out. A lot of my images from the earlier rolls that I've shot just have completely random dates on them. Don't know what, I don't even know what the fuck date it says on it either. Sometimes if I can, I do get rid of the date on the image. But other times on my images, it just has this random, fucking date on it. But I have figured out how to turn it off, which I don't really know how I did that. Kind of just put the battery in and played with the date button, and then they just went away. So I've kind of, just kept it on that, because I think it's, just the easiest. Obviously, it does kind of add stuff having the date in your image. I think it does, kind of look cool. It definitely has, those film aesthetic vibes to it. But there is also kind of a place where you'd want the date, kind of just, more for like, lifestyle, day in the life kind of stuff. I kind of just shoot this how I normally shoot, film, doing a lot of street, kind of composition stuff, and I think, the date in those would be distracting, so I'm, fine without it having the date, but, definitely, it's each to their own. If you want the date, you can have it. I've actually not even, really looked in how to get the date working. Probably, could figure it out if I looked it up, but I just really can't be bothered to figure out how to work the date thing on it, so it's there, but I just don't care about it. See, now this just looks weird, doesn't it? Kind of the last interesting thing about this camera is its ability to shoot kind of the fake panoramic images. And what I mean by this is, with normal 35mm panoramics, like with the Hasselblad X-Pan or the Fuji equivalent of it, you get, a single image across multiple frames. But this one, basically what it is, it's a single image. It's literally just cropped down on the top and bottom to kind of give you that fake panoramic aspect. So there's a switch on the bottom of the camera, and you just move that to the right, and then kind of these dividers come down on the top and bottom of the part, where your film gets exposed. And basically what that's doing is it's blocking, your film from being the top and bottom parts of it from being exposed. So you kind of get these just like blank bars on the top and bottom of your film, where there's no information at all, and that's kind of how you achieve, the panoramic aspect. Um, Obviously, these probably came out at a time when the Hasselblad X-Pan was, more readily available, and everyone was kind of, obsessed with the, panoramic aspect, but didn't have, the money to, spend on a Hasselblad, so they kind of just put it into a cheap point and shoot that way. There's not really much use for these nowadays. Obviously, the panoramic aspect does look kind of cool. It's interesting as well, but not everything does look good in it either. So that's kind of have your option of both, which is nice. But nowadays it's really easy to just crop into your film, and if you still want that information, you can still get it. So I think it's just best to kind of shoot this normally, and then if you want that panoramic aspect ratio, just crop into it later in post. Okay, so I'm trying to get, like the panoramic rip-off kind of thing, but in vertical, and it's like this really like thin line. This is like the weirdest aspect ever, and it's very stupid, but we're gonna see if I can get a vertical one just to see. Alright, yep. Definitely do not like this panoramic fake thing. It's probably the stupidest thing ever, and I don't know why they decided to put it on this camera. Now for the shutter speed and aperture, obviously you don't get any control over this camera whatsoever, but just because of that doesn't mean, those settings still aren't there. The camera will kind of take in, your situations that you're shooting in, and will decide from there what it thinks it's best to do for the image. So for the shutter speed, the highest you can shoot is 1/400th of a second, and the slowest you can get all the way down to 2 seconds. But you do kind of have to, sometimes take that into account. Like if you are shooting something that you think needs to be, faster than 1/400th of a second, obviously, you're probably not going to get that image. And, also as, the night, comes and everything starts to get darker, the camera's shutter speed will, automatically go down. And, if it gets to a point where it's below 1/60th of a second, you need to, put it on a tripod. That way you don't get that, camera shake and your image is actually, in focus. And then for the aperture, the range is f4.8 to f12.5. Now for the actual quality of the images you get from this camera, they're a pretty okay quality to them. There's obviously nothing special to them. And, obviously, they have a lot of higher up, more expensive, cameras out there. The quality on those is obviously going to be a lot better, more, fine grain and all that. While this one has, a little bit more grain to it compared to others. But, it still holds up pretty well. The only times where I felt like this thing really didn't work that well was kind of in the, when the shutter speed went, higher up. So like when I was capturing the windmills, obviously the shutter speed had to go a lot faster just to, the freeze of those. But for some reason, it felt like it also doubled the ISO on it for some reason. So like the grain in those images is just, too much, like a mess. It's just so much grain. It doesn't really look that good at all. I kind of, prefer more of the fine grain style. But these are just like completely, super double grain for some reason. So, but it's just kind of the limitations you do have to work with this camera. It's whatever it thinks is best, it's gonna do, no matter how good or bad the image is gonna turn out. So that's kind of a thing you have to work with. But when I was just shooting, standing still, all the stationary, nothing was moving. Those images, turn out perfectly fine. If you were looking at them, you would not be able to tell that they were taking with a cheap point and shoot. So obviously, this camera does actually, turn out pretty well. So for $10, this is actually, a pretty okay camera. Obviously I don't really care about the quality when I shoot with this. It's mainly kind of just, the things that, I couldn't really get with another camera. Kind of like, so when I flew to Michigan, I was just, walking around the airport, shooting with this thing. because you know you don't really want to look suspicious in an airport, and kind of feel like the more time you're standing around, the more suspicious you're gonna look. So it was kind of just nice to quickly walk around and snapping pictures just easily with this thing. And then also when I went snowboarding, just not having the worry of falling or taking like a bigger camera with me that can end up breaking, and still being able to get shots, because it was something, I don't snowboard a lot, so still being able to get those shots was definitely nice. I just really just have a lot of fun with this camera, which I think is very interesting compared to more of my more expensive cameras. I don't really play around with them as much, so the fact that something so cheap and inexpensive as $10 is giving me the freedom to kind of play around and have fun and get stuff that I wouldn't normally be able to get is definitely kind of an interesting mindset there. There is also different versions of this cameras as well. Like this one is a 120mm is the highest zoom you can get. There's a Pentax 160, although I feel like 160 is just too big of a zoom for me. I don't really see why you would need to get 160 zoom on a point and shoot either, but I guess if you really want that zoom, you do have that option for it, but to each their own, I guess. But yeah, this is a pretty nice little point and shoot camera. So, if you happen to see one of these at an antique store, or, just see some cheap point and shoots at an antique store, thrift store, it's never a bad option to try them out, because you never know what, you'll be able to get with this as compared to some of your other cameras.